Hello, friends, and welcome to Trenton 365. I'm Jacque Howard, your host. You can always contact me on any of the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, to suggest someone to come onto the program, or if you have some comments or thoughts, we always really appreciate them because that is how we build a better community for everyone when everyone has an opportunity to learn and share the same experiences. Really stoked today because I've got members of the DNR Greenway on, and I know a lot of folks may have heard of the DNR Greenway and see some of the signage around, but you don't really understand what's going on because generally it's beautiful open space and lots of wildlife and so forth. And you say, well, wait a minute, why is DNR Greenway got a sign here or Green Acres Project and it's wide open space? What is that all about? Well, get your pens and writing utensils and paper together because we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we have some really, really exciting international news that is happening right here in central New Jersey. Many of you know about the Bonaparte family, and I'm talking about Napoleon's brother in Bordentown City and the mansion that he owned. Well, we've got two members of the DNR Greenway who are going to come on and going to talk about this wonderful project that has brought international media outlets to find out what's going on here. And I have Linda Mead, who is the president and CEO of the DNR Greenway. And then soon we're going to be bringing on Maria Stahl, who is the Community Conservation Fellow, also with the program. So to both of you ladies, welcome to the program. And I'd like for you to start first, Linda. Just share a little bit about the history of the DNR Greenway and your position as the CEO of that organization.
Sure, Jacques, and thank you so much for having us. It's great to be able to get our message out to people in the area. So this is so important for us. DNR Greenway was founded in 1989. And if you think back to 1989, there was a lot of development going on here in central New Jersey. And there was not at the time a nonprofit organization that was focusing just on central New Jersey and trying to preserve the lands that are right here in our own backyards. So four visionary people got together and they worked with the state Green Acres program and they founded the DNR Greenway Land Trust. So over the last 31 years, we have now preserved 21,196 acres. The preservation of the Joseph Bonaparte property, which is known as Point Breeze in Bordentown, was the 315th property that we preserved. And you mentioned our signs. So when you go out and drive along the roadways in central New Jersey, you might see a sign. It has a leaf on it. It's yellow and green, and it says preserved land. And what those signs mean is those are properties where we have preserved that land so it permanently stays as open space. And people tell me that's one of their favorite things when they drive down the road. They know our area is going to stay the way it is because they see that sign and they know that land's preserved.
Linda, I want you to drive into that just a little bit more because when we talk about preserved land, I think some people may not really understand what that means. And I'm going to say that literally this is native land. This land is never going to be developed. There's not going to be any roadways or anything that go through it. But there are sometimes provisions that are done, such as a walking path or an elevated structure, which an observation deck or something like that. But when that's done, that's to enhance and get the community involved. It has nothing to do with harming the natural resources, correct?
Absolutely right. So, as a land trust, our goal is to protect conservation lands. So, lands along waterways that keep clean, high quality water coming out of our spigots. And we also make sure that we protect farmland. So, we have places that grow food, like Capital City Farm that we helped establish in Trenton. And we protect places where there are opportunities to bring the public on to walk and enjoy, bird watch, picnic, hike, enjoy the natural open space. So when we preserve land, we do it one of two ways. We either buy it outright, and in the case, for instance, of the Point Breeze property in Bordentown, we bought the 1 acre of that outright and we partnered with the state and the city to buy outright the rest of the property, a total of 60 acres. In other cases, we buy the development rights off of properties that are privately owned. And usually, if we use public funding to do that, even on those private properties, there's a trail access easement. So our goal is thinking about what you do with your reach, recreation, environment, those top two RE things are exactly what we do. And I believe your C stands for community, and that is right at the core, right at the heart of our mission.
Spot on, Linda. Well done. Thank you so much for that little plug too. And folks, I want you to know that the space at the DNR Greenway, the location, the headquarters, is this beautiful space in Princeton. And Linda, can you just share a little bit about that and the address?
Sure. The address is One Preservation Place. We named that street ourselves. And it's right off of Rosedale Road in Princeton, between Carter and the Great Road. And what's interesting about that is it's a property that was owned by Robert Wood Johnson of Johnson and Johnson Companies. And he bought the property back in the 1950s, built a big house up on the hill. And after he passed away, it remained in his estate for another 30 years. And in the 90s, it was going to be sold for development. And there was a development plan to put 50 houses on the property. And so DNR Greenway got involved. Actually, it was neighbors that reached out to us and asked if we could help and see the property preserved. And so we put together a funding package that include the state, the county, the local municipality, and a lot of private fundraising, which is something we do quite a bit. And together we purchased the property and turned over the majority of it to the town as a park, which is called Greenway Meadows. And we kept a core area with some buildings, one of which is a 10,000 square foot barn. So it's big. It was in great shape when we bought it, but it truly was a barn. And we renovated that into our headquarters. So it is now really a community center. We have art galleries there. And when COVID is no longer keeping us from gathering together, people can come visit us and they will see changing art exhibits. We have had many different artists from all over the region, many from the Trenton Bordentown area that have exhibited in our art galleries. There's a children's gallery, there's a more professional art gallery, and those are open during the day. People can come visit those anytime. In addition to that, we have meeting spaces and we have a lot of groups that gather for special programs, for special events, and just to come together to network and figure out how we can create a better community for all the people that live here.
And that is spot on, Linda. And it is indeed a beautiful, wonderfully restored facility. It's got everything that you need. It's a great location. And for those folks who have not been there, it's also a great space just to come and be. Just come and be and relax and kind of just stroll through the grounds. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And a lot of times folks don't realize that that kind of tranquility is so close to all the hustle and bustle that goes on around us here in the capital county of Mercer. Linda, you touched on how the DNR Greenway is partnering with lots of different organizations, state, local municipalities, et cetera. And I want to bring Maria Stahl on now, who is the Community Conservation Fellow, Princeton University undergrad. Big up to PU there. But I want to bring you on, Maria, because you work on a lot of the projects that are taking place in the Bordentown and Trenton area. So I'd like for you to introduce yourself, talk about a little bit from where you're from and the importance of doing this type of work.
Yeah, hi. So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, actually, and I came to New Jersey for undergrad, like you mentioned, and that's how I got introduced to Linda and the DNR Greenway. And I'm really, really excited about the projects we have going on in Bordentown. I grew up next to the Milwaukee River, so waterways and river access ways are really important to me. I grew up, understanding how important it is to have access to things like that. So with the Delaware River running right next to Bordentown, it's really important to me to have the opportunity to get the communities engaged with the river. I've worked with the Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund, which is an organization. They have a high school mentorship program for first generation immigrants in the area. They have a branch in Trenton and a branch in Princeton. And, these kids, they may not have the opportunity or the reasons to interact with the Delaware River, even though it's right in their backyard practically. So some of the things that we've been doing to engage them with the river is our big project that we're hoping to launch maybe this summer is a kayak program where we get these students into kayaks with educators who can introduce them to the history and the ecology of the Delaware River watershed, and immerse them in the watershed and the river. So Bordentown Beach is where we will be launching the kayaks from. And if you have the chance to go to Bordentown Beach, you'll see that we have a big storage container there, a big shipping container with a beautiful mural on it. That's where we'll be keeping the kayaks. And the mural was a really fantastic project that happened last year before I joined the Greenway. But these students, they all created little drawings inspired by the river. And then we worked with a local artist, a local mural artist, Marlene Davila, who painted this gorgeous mural inspired by the students' artwork. So we're doing, things like that to get communities involved with the river and preserving land.
That's great, and it's really good that you've got this historical experience with the river, and then being able to work with the DNR Greenway in conjunction with what's happening with the Delaware River as well. And I also like the fact that you brought up the youth and how many of them may not be fully engaged with the waterway, understanding the importance of it, and also understanding how they can preserve it and take care of that for themselves. So not only are you doing something as far as giving them an opportunity to understand this, but you're also hopefully bringing some new scientists into the land, et cetera, because maybe these young adults and children will start thinking about things differently regarding the waterway. So that leads me to talk about this wonderful project at Point Breeze in Bordentown. And as I'm sure many people know, like if you are on 295, you can see this property as you ride by. And I know even as a child, when 295 was open, it was like, wow, look at that house that's up there. I never really realized that. And then later you start thinking about it as you're driving through Bordentown City and you're like, oh, that's that house. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the house, about some of the historical perspective of it, and also how come it's so great that we have this it's going to be preserved now.
So, Jacques, I'm glad you asked about it. The area when you're driving along 295, you see a big wetland area. It's kind of a big, low, marshy area, and the Crosswicks Creek comes right through there, and you cross over the Crosswicks Creek. So that whole area is known as the Abbott Marshlands. And that has been known for many, many years. Archaeologists have looked at the Abbott Marshlands and found that Native Americans, the Lenape people, were here 13,000 years ago. And DNR Greenway has been involved with the Abbott Marshlands for over 25 years, working to protect and care for different areas within the Abbott Marshlands. And Point Breeze in Bordentown is kind of the southern end of the Abbott Marshlands. So it's an important property for many reasons, one of which it's a gateway to the Abbott Marshlands. It's a viewpoint where you start to be introduced to that. It's also a gateway to the city of Bordentown because you come right off 130 and 206, and you come down Park Street off at 206, and you're right there at Point Breeze. And so it's a gateway to the city. But importantly, back in 1815 or so till 1839, Joseph Napoleon Bonaparte, who was the exiled king of Spain, came and made his home here. And while he was there, he built two different mansions. Unfortunately, neither of which is still there. The first one burnt down a few years after he built it, and it was substantial. I mean, it was bigger than the barn the DNR Greenway is in by far. And it was bigger, they say, than the White House of the United States at the time. It was also had an art collection in it that was, first in the country of European art, over 200 pieces of European art. And it had a book collection bigger than the Library of Congress. So all of this kind of European culture came and was part of this Point Breeze estate. And when the fire happened, he was not at the property at the time, but people from town who had a wonderful relationship with Joseph Bonaparte came to the property. Remember, there were, no fire trucks running down the street now. So they were able to come to the property, go in and rescue some of the art and the books that were in that mansion. And he was so taken aback when he came back and learned of the fire and learned of the community's support to rescue all those pieces, which they brought back to him. No one took them away. They weren't looted. They were brought back to their rightful owner. And he made a commitment to the community at that time. And he built a second mansion and stayed on the property for 20 years before he went back to Europe. What's still standing right now is the gardener's house. And that's the piece that DNR Greenway has purchased. Is the gardener's house itself is where the gardener for the property lived. Very important person because they grew the food. No grocery stores to go to. They grew all the food for the property. And all the many people that visited the property, John Quincy Adams, John James Audubon, all these people came to the property and ate the food grown by the gardener on this property. So we now own the gardener's house, and the goal is to turn that into a museum and a gateway museum that talks about land use layers through the ages and focuses on the Bonaparte era. And what's really exciting to me, Jacque, is the recreation of the gardens. Because what I would love to see, and our vision is kind of coming together now to recreate the garden area that was there, at least in part. It was about 7 acres of gardens. So it will be more like 1 acre of garden when we get it recreated. But what we hope to do is create gardens that can show historically what was there, but also be relevant today. So, for instance, when you grow vegetables there, will it be people from town or from the area that might have their own community plot? Or it might be people that come together and grow food that might be donated to the local food pantry. So we're figuring out how all of that is going to work. But I love the fact that we're taking something that is a wonderful, historical, internationally significant place and making it relevant to people that live here today.
And Linda, I love the fact that you keep talking about some very key points, that this isn't about preserving something for just a small group of people. This is something that is for everyone. And in addition to that, we want everyone to get involved in this, experience it, learn the history, and the fact that there's this great opportunity, even with this project, to maybe even have a potential public space where more people who don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables may be able to get this, and also to get this in a historical component, tying in the youth that Maria is working with. Maria, I'd like to bring you on a little bit and have you talk about what are some of the thoughts that the children are sharing or expressing to you as you tell them about this exciting project.
Well, I think they're really, to have an open space like this that's closer to home for them, they're really excited about the opportunity to access the open space. Earlier this fall, we had several restoration projects where we planted trees in our preserves, and some of the Waldorf students were able to come and help us out with those projects to plant the trees and help restore the preserves, which, to get them involved in the preservation and the restoration of these sites, I think that's really important to feel like, so that they feel like they have a role in this journey. And going back to what Linda was saying about how Bonaparte was so grateful to the community for saving his works. One of my favorite parts about his story is after that happened, he made a commitment to the community to let them use his property and enjoy the space. He'd open up his woods to the community every once in a while. And there's this story about how in the winter, he had this dammed lake, and in the winter, the lake would freeze over. So he'd bring the kids from Bordentown in so they could go skating on this ice rink. And he'd bring them oranges and other, exotic things. So we're really trying to keep that that mentality of bringing people together to enjoy the open space. And I think that the students, the kids will really appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Linda, leading an organization of this magnitude, it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts. You spoke very eloquently about how, you're an organization, but you're working with community partners, you're working with the local community, you're working with the public. There's a lot that goes on with that. And you know how it is working with lots of groups and big amounts of people. No one's going to agree on everything. So there's a diplomacy that needs to be done. And obviously you have that ability because you're leading the DNR Greenway. Going forward, general public, people in the community, just learning about DNR, what would you like to say to them?
Oh, I would like to say to them that preserving land is one of the most important things that we can do because it's the basis for everything. It's the basis for our clean water that all of us need. There are 15 million people that get their drinking water from the Delaware River. It is the basis for the growing the food that we eat and having healthy foods that we don't have to truck from other places, but we can grow right here. And it's really during this COVID pandemic, we have found how important our open spaces are to everyone that lives in the community. I've had so many people reach out and say, I just found your trail. Thank you so much. It brought me some peace and calm during a very difficult time. So I think for, every possible aspect of who we are as a people, I think having good health, having places that give us respite, and having places that are really common ground that bring us all together. That's what we do, and we invite everybody to join us in doing that. Our goal is to have one person engaged for every acre that we preserve. So we've preserved 21,200 acres. We would love to have 21,200 people that are engaged in some way. You could be a supporter, you could be a volunteer, you could be somebody that walks on our trails and signs up for our social media or our email. We send out 3 emails a week where we tell people where you can go to take walks, what's happening, when Maria's programs are coming forward, what's happening with those. We did some wonderful messaging that Maria created that was on the marquee in front on Route 29 in front of the Arm and Hammer Stadium, and where the Trenton Thunder were, I guess, and that messaging about the Delaware River watershed was highlighted on these email messages. So we invite everybody to participate because whether you're stuck at home during the pandemic and you can't get out, or whether you get to a point where you can get out and take a walk on a lovely trail, it's an opportunity for you to experience something important in life.
That's fantastic. Maria Stahl, who is the Community Conservation Fellow at the DNR Greenway for this year, Princeton U undergrad. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you're going to be seeing more of me at some point in time. And of course, Linda Mead, who is the president and CEO of the DNR Greenway. Thank you so much for coming onto the program and sharing about this initiative. And I can't wait to have you back to let me know how things are going and also how things open up more during the pandemic and also the warmer season. Thank you all very, very much. Friends, you've been listening and watching the Trenton 365 show. It is all about civic engagement radio, and we want to connect with you and share more information with you and hear about what's happening in your life and in your community. Just reach out on social media platforms and let me know, and we'll be in touch. It's always about justice, peace, and humility. Have a great day, everyone.